Vamos a decir del 13. Volvemos a tener otro número primo, a mí me tocan los impares, bastantes primos vamos a tener. Y ya sabéis que es el gemelo del primo 11, los que habéis estado en la charla número 11, porque están a distancia 2. Además, bueno, es el primer OMIRP. ¿Qué es un OMIRP? Es primo escrito al revés. ¿Por qué? Porque el 13, cuando le dais la vuelta, es 31, que también es un número primo. Los matemáticos hacemos cosas muy raras, como esta, y estas son cosas que se estudian de verdad. Además, bueno, es conocido por ser el número de la mala suerte en muchos países, como por ejemplo en España, y de hecho existe la triskaidecafobia, que es el miedo al número 13, que está documentado desde hace siglos, de hecho. Pero bueno, yo creo que la que seguro que no tiene miedo a nada es nuestra siguiente invitada, porque se atreve a hacer arte con CSS. La charla, aunque ella habla español, mucho mejor de lo que dice, pero la va a hacer en inglés. Así que la presentación la voy a hacer en inglés. So, it's really my pleasure to introduce you all the Cassidy Williams. She's a senior software engineer at CodePen. She graduated with a computer science degree in 2014 and has worked for tech companies like Amazon, L4 Digital, and many others. She's a very active developer. She's very active in the developer community and one of the glamorous magazine's 35 women under 35, changing the tech industry. She's a really avid speaker, and we are really glad to have her here in Spain once again and for the first time at the T3chFest. So please give a great applause to Cassidy Williams.
Hola. I'm going to speak in English, but I'm sorry. Si necesitas me hablar en español, puedo un poco, pero no mucho. But hello, my name is Cassidy, and I'll be talking about creating art with CSS. And if you'd like to talk to me, you can tweet me whenever you want. I'm very lonely, so I could use some new friends. So the first thing that a lot of people ask me when I talk about making art with CSS is they say, why? Why would you do that? It's the worst language ever. and they talk about how it's hard to vertically align things and everything. And it's true. And the reason why I started making art with CSS is because I was not very good at it. I normally code in JavaScript. I do a lot of React and other things. And I thought, well, if I want to start practicing CSS, maybe I'll start trying to make little doodles with it. And then I just started to get better because I was making so many different things with it. And so there are a few different reasons that I encourage you to make art with CSS that I have learned by making art with CSS. And so first of all, it will just make you better at it. Practice makes perfect. Repetition is recognition. You learn a lot by making things that are more unusual. Whenever I get a new layout or something to code for my job, because I've made art with CSS, now I can do it much quicker, much faster, and so it makes you better at it. It also helps you see graphics more modularly. Whenever I see a graphic now, I think, okay, if I were to make this with CSS, I would add a border radius here, I would cut it off here, and it's a great way to break things down modularly, just like you do with web applications, but this time it's more art applications. And it also forces you to think a lot harder about how you organize your code. And whenever you're organizing large applications, you have to figure out, okay, how am I going to organize my folders? How am I going to put my functions here and there? And a lot of people don't really organize their CSS very well, I have learned. But by doing it this way, by learning how to make CSS art, you can kind of figure out how you will organize your code a little better when it comes to CSS, and it'll help you in your job in the long run. And so those are the main reasons why I like to encourage this. And so in terms of thinking about graphics that you want to make with CSS, I have a few examples here. And so you'll notice in this bench there are a few different components. And so first of all, there's 3 green rectangles, and each of them have a small little border radius that makes them a little bit more round. And then the bottom one is more of a trapezoid, and so you have to round it that way. There's some lines in the back. You have that weird shape in the background that you would have to organize. But you can break it down in that way, so you could have your bench, you could have the lines in the bench, and then you could have your background with the shapes in that. And it's the same thing with this sort of planet graphic. You can have 2 circles with a gradient that comes from the top. They might have overflow hidden and then a shadow behind it. And it's just an interesting way to kind of see how you would break it down, because these are all using very similar techniques, even though the art styles might be the same, when you start thinking about how you would code them with CSS. And this one, I thought this was cute. This one is almost even easier because you could just make this all as divs. It's just a div with rounded corners, and then behind it is a div with rounded corners. You have a circle, border radius 50%, and you can really just mess around with it and layer all of these rectangles. And it's easy for me to talk about this, but it's better for you to actually build it yourself. And so usually when I am about to make some art with CSS, I have some tools. So first of all, a place to code. You could code on your desktop. You could code on CodePen, which obviously I love CodePen, so I recommend that. A color picker is great when you're trying to duplicate a graphic in CSS, or if you draw something and try to make it. It's always good to get your colors right and figure out how you would pick that. And then also something to measure pixels. Something that I personally need to do is use a screenshotting tool or something, so that way I can figure out, okay, this is exactly 500 pixels in the graphic. Let's just say I make it smaller. I can proportion it differently and stuff. And so these are the tools that I always have handy when I start to make a graphic. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking and actually show you how to make some graphics right now, because live coding is always a good thing to do, right? It's easy peasy. So I have not actually prepared any of this, and so you're going to tell me what I'm going to make. I went to Dribble and I looked up Spanish things, and so I could either make this little sausage, or chorizo, I could make this animation of a glass of wine, or I could make this logo of Real Madrid. Which one should I make? Tell me. Second one? Second one? Third one? Okay, I'm going to need a show of hands. So who wants to do number 1? Okay, okay. Number 2. Whoa, way more. Okay, all right. And number 3? Oh, wow. I'm kind of surprised. I thought so many people would be excited about this. Okay, cool. We're going to be doing tinto de verano, see? Okay, so I'm going to be going to CodePen, and I'm going to be creating a new pen, and I'm just going to call this one Live Demo. And something that you might not know that you can do is, if you have a pro account, I can set this to professor mode, so you can actually follow along right now. And I am going to, let's see, change my settings here to no preprocessor for a second. And I'm going to put this, ooh, I'm not used to the Spanish keyboard, 1 second. I am going to copy this here, and then do body. Oh, I'm not used to the Spanish keyboard. Okay, and then font, size, where's my dash? Es diferente. 3EM, and then that. If you go to this URL on your phones or on your computers, you can follow along as I code this wine glass. So I'll wait a few seconds before I make that go away, and then I'll start putting this together. I see a lot of people looking down. When you have it on your devices, just start nodding very slowly, and then I'll see the nods throughout the group. Okay, I'm very proud of you all for choosing a glass of wine. This will be fun. Okay, I see one person nodding. You are, okay. Yeah, almost. Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs up. Okay, all right. So now I am going to start putting together this glass of wine. And so this glass of wine will have a very fun animation. And what I'm going to do is create 3 circles, one for the top, one for the red part, one for the bottom, and then a line for the stem of the vase. And then I'll have to do the animation later because that might be a tiny bit more complex. But we'll just have all of them come up together, and then all of them come together at the end. And so this should be fun. So in terms of the size for this, there are a few different ways to get the size. Normally, I use a Mac, and so I just use the screenshotting tool. I could also put this in Microsoft Paint or something, but we know that this is red, and we know that this is a circle. And so I'm just going to get rid of this right here now. And what I'm going to do is turn on a preprocessor for Haml. I normally do just HTML, but it's a little faster to do Haml, and so I'll do it that way because I can just do div names. And so I'm going to call this top one container, because that's going to contain the entire graphic. And then inside the graphic, we're going to want the top circle, so I'll just call it top circle, dash, top circle, and then we'll need the red circle, and then we'll need the stem, and then we'll need the bottom circle. Okay. And so this is all the HTML I'm going to write, and the rest will be all in CSS. And if I view the compiled HTML, view the compile. Oh, it's funky how it's not doing that. But anyway, that creates a top-level div that has the class container and then 4 divs inside of it. And so if I were to do container here, and then let me get my, I'm not used to this keyboard. OK, so just to make sure that our CSS is working, I'm going to do background. Red, are we working? OK, we're working. Great. OK, so the first thing that I always do is in the body, I make the margin 0 and then the padding 0. And so one thing that you might not know is that every single element in a DOM node tree always has a natural margin and a natural padding. And this doesn't matter too much for us in this particular example, but the body is one of those nodes in the DOM tree that has that natural margin and padding. And so when we make things center on the screen, we want to remove all the little spacing that could be around the edge of the screen, so that way we don't have things be slightly off center, because that would bug me. OK. Cool. Now with the container is just going to be the thing that holds everything in the center of the screen. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the container have a position absolute. Absolute. And so when you make something a position absolute, what that does is that makes everything absolute to the previously defined container or previously defined node in the DOM tree, and in this case it's just the body, and so it'll be absolutely positioned to the body. And if I were to make this position absolute and then these children in here also position absolute, they would be attached to the container because that has that definition there, and that'll be important for our animations later. And so to guarantee something to be center, you can do top 50%, and then, forgot my semicolon, and then left 50%, which gets everything moved to the 50% point, but it's the top left corner of that. And so we'll translate that, or translate, and then we'll do, where's my dash, -50%, -50%. OK, so this invisible container that we have is now officially centered. Pretty impressive, right? It's exciting. OK, cool. So now we'll actually get our containers, or our actual divs in there. And so, so for the top circle, we're probably going to make all the circles actually the same size. So I'm going to do top circle, and then the red circle. I am really getting used to this keyboard. It's interesting. I'm used to having my dashes more towards the top, and then we don't have the upside down question mark and everything in different spots. And then bottom circle. We're going to make all of these circles the same size. Bottom circle, where's the dash? There it is. OK, cool. So we have these in there, and then let's just say the width of them. I'm not sure. We are kind of making this up here, so I'll just say that the width of them is going to be 100 pixels. And then if we have to make it smaller, we can. 100 pixels, and then height will also be 100 pixels. 100 pixels. OK, so we just want the width and height to be the same. And then I'm also going to add a border on each of these. Border. And the border can be anything because we're, again, kind of making this up. But that border looks like relatively thick, but not too thick. 3 pixels. Again, we're going live. We'll see how it goes. OK, so we have our circles. Wow, and look how centered they are. That's amazing. OK, so we have our centered circles, and we're also going to add, or they're squares now, but now we're going to make them circles by adding a border radius of 50%. OK, cool. So we have our circles. And we know that the red circle actually isn't going to have a border, so we can just remove that later or figure out how we want to do that. So now that we have these 3 circles, we're going to make actually, I'll do the red circle now. Red circle, and then I'm getting fast at typing on this. OK, I'm going to say the border is none. And then we're going to have the background of this to be red. All right, we're getting close there. And that's actually kind of a bright red. Let's do a different red. I'll do more like 200, 00. How's that? Yeah, it's not much of a difference, but it looks better to me. So, OK. So now that we have these 3 circles, one thing that you might notice, which it's very, very, very small, but if you're looking at a screen closely, you might be able to see, the red circle is actually off to the side a little bit. And that's because the border adds a thickness to the divs. And so what I can do is I can actually do box sizing, border box. And then by doing that, that will make everything the correct size, and so we won't have anything just slightly off when we add our animation in. OK, and we can't forget the stem. The stem has to be added too. And the stem is going to be the same height as everything. So we'll say it's 100 pixels, but it doesn't need a width because we'll just add a border to it. And so stem will be this one. OK, and then it'll be a height 100 pixels. Man, that Enye is getting in my way. OK. 100 pixels. And then we'll do the border. And actually, I'll just do the border on the side, so that way we don't have to deal with the top and bottom borders and everything. So I'll just do border left. And then it'll be the same thing as we have before. It's 3 pixels, solid black. OK. Cool. All right. Beautiful. Now, one thing that we do notice is that it's actually taking on the same width as the circles, and so I might have to do this differently. Let me just say width is, my width is 3 pixels. We'll see what that looks like. Sorry, I'm not used to this keyboard. OK. So in order to center these, one thing that I'm actually going to do is I'm going to make this a display flex. And so what it'll do initially is make everything side by side, but it'll make things centered. And so once I've done that, I'm actually going to do flex direction is column. And then, OK, flex direction is column. And then what I'm going to do with this one is actually, instead of setting the border, I'll just make this the background is black. Every time. OK, cool. Now, again, it's still not centered, so you might say, hey, Cassidy, that did absolutely nothing. But it did something, I promise. So when you add flex, you can add nice little things like align items. And then when I align items center, booyah, look at that centered thing. OK, great. So now we have all of our components of our wine glass, and now it's just a matter of adding the animation, which will be the fun part. OK, so to add the animation, we want everything to eventually be in the center, and we want everything to kind of not start at this position, but be a little bit more artsy, and so we'll have to play with it a little bit. But we know what the ending position should be. And so what I'm going to do here is add the animation, which, OK, @ sign, that's new. OK, keyframes, And then I'll just do move to center. Actually, let's shorten that because I'm going to be typing this a lot. MC, move to center. And this one is going to be the top. So we'll make that the top part of that top circle. So again, we know that we want it to be in the absolute center at the end, but at the beginning, we want it to be somewhere else. And so there's a few things that you can do. You can start it at 0%. That is an 8. 0%, or you could make it do from and then to. And so there's different things that you can start with. I'll just do 0 to 100% because numbers are fun. And so when we want the glass to be finished, we want the top to be at 50%. So top 50%. 50%. So that's going to be the ending of the animation. And at the beginning, we want it to be a little bit above 50%. And I'm not sure where we should start it, but I'm just going to make up a number here and say 20%, top 20%. There we go. OK. So this is where it'll start, and this is where it'll end. And I'm going to do a keyframe animation for every single one of these. I'm going to move that JS thing because we don't need it there. And then I want to make sure that all of these divs are positioned absolute because we're going to be referencing them a lot. OK, cool. So now that they are going to be moving, oh, look at that. They're all in a nice spot. That's going to be a great spot for them to end. And so actually, that means because the container will be at 0, we don't need to make this top 50%. We just need this to be top 0. And that means I could actually make this a little bit more hard-coded and do negative 30 pixels, let's just say. So we'll start with negative 30 pixels and end up at 0. And it'll be the same thing. We're going to basically do this kind of positioning for every single one, but let's first make sure that this actually works. And so I'm going to do one keyframe animation right here for top circle. Right there, and then I'm going to set the animation by doing animation, and then you can set how long you want the animation to take. I don't know how long this animation takes. Let's just say 4 seconds. So you could just do 4 seconds, and then this animation, we named it MC Top, and then infinite, so that way it happens more than once. Okay. Cool. Oh, look at that. It's moving. OK, so the first thing that we have to note is that this circle is actually behind everything instead of on top of everything. And so what we can do is add a z-index, and a z-index will put it on top of things. I'll just say 10. 10 will be our high number. And so now that is going to be at the very top and ends up there. And we can do the exact same thing for the other ones now. And so we have the top circle, and then the red circle is next. And it'll be a very, very similar animation. I'll call this MC Red. And then instead of 30 pixels, let's see, this looks like it ends up being, I don't know, I'm going to say 10. We'll see how it looks, and then we can adjust from there. And so it'll be the exact same thing here, only I'll call it MC Red. And we'll see how that looks. Ooh, look at that. It's going somewhere. Oh, this is exciting. OK, cool. And so now the next one will be the stem. And now the stem is one that one actually goes down too. Really only the bottom thing goes up, as far as I can tell. No, the stem goes up. I was wrong. OK. So if I do this and then call MC stem, this one is actually, I'm going to say positive 20. And we're eyeballing this, and so we will see how this goes. But it should be fairly similar, where if we go in here and then we call MC stem, we can see if that one works. And our animation is going a little bit slow. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to make it only 2 seconds, and then we can extend it a little bit later. Let's see, 2 seconds. OK, yeah, that's going a little bit too. So I'm going to make this stem actually be let's go a little nuts and call it 40 from the top, and we'll see how that goes. And then we'll also do the bottom circle as well. Bottom, whoop. And then we'll do that top, I'll say 50 for now. And we'll add that animation and see how that looks. Bottom circle. You guys are a great audience, you're so quiet. Okay, cool, and let's see how that looks. Oh, look at that. Okay, so we need to adjust the z-index of the bottom circle as well. Z-index, and then I'll just say -1 for now. -1 automatically puts it at the bottom of whatever container it's in. Okay, we've got that kind of looking good. Oh, and you know what? So we have it going this way, but we don't have it going the other way. And so we need to adjust some of the positioning, and we also need to make it go back and forth, because then it can be more like a boomerang. So what I can do is, it's kind of copying this exact same thing, only I can do 50% here, and then 100% here. And I'm pretty sure there's a way to also make an animation go back and forth, but that can be finicky, so it's easy to just do this. And so I'm going to add this here, and then basically duplicate that across. And with a lot of, right now I'm technically using SCSS. I could be using just plain CSS. You can make a mix-in or a function that does this for you. I'm kind of being a purist today and sticking with the native stuff, but you can do whatever you want. Okay, and then we're going to be doing the exact same thing. It's starting to look good. It's exciting. Makes me want some vino. Okay, and then last one. Look at that little glass of wine. It's so happy. Okay, look at that. We've got a bouncing little glass of wine. How about that? How do you guys like it? What would you change if you could? We can add whatever you want. Wow, you guys really are quiet. That's okay. So anyway, this is a very simple graphic that we were able to put together relatively quickly. I could probably adjust the timing and the sizing and everything, but this is a very basic example of something that you could practice by looking up some simple line art and then going from there. I see someone talking. Lo siento, ¿qué? Lo siento, no entiendo.
Mantener el fin del palito en el medio del círculo.
Oh, that's a good idea. Okay. So she had a very good idea of putting the stem and making sure that it's actually staying in the center of the bottom circle. And that's a really good idea, because what you can do then is we don't actually have to position the stem as much. What we could do is we could put the stem inside of the bottom circle. Here, and that will kind of mess up our positioning a tiny bit, but we'll make it work. And so what we can do is we can say that we want the stem to always be, I'm going to take out the animation for the stem really quick. We want the stem to always be inside here, and so I'm going to make the bottom circle have a position. It already has a position absolute because I said it before. And so what I'll do here is I'm going to say that I want the left to be 50%. Oop, that enye again. Left 50%. And then I'm going to do the bottom is also 50%. And let's see how that looks. Okay, it is not moving. Oh, I gotta add this. Position absolute here. There we go. Okay, so it's not perfect, but it's getting there. So what I'll do first is I'll actually, let me cut this out first and see what that actually looks like. Okay, so it's in the right spot, so that's a good start. And we just have to make sure that we hide it. Oh, this is an interesting problem. So what we can do to hide it is we can actually set the bottom circle to have what's it called? Overflow. So if we set the overflow to hidden, when we set it to hidden, that means that anything that ends up outside of it will disappear. And so now we're not seeing our stem, even though we know it's the right position, so we should adjust the positioning of everything. And so I'm going to actually make this one, instead of going to -30, I'll make it go to -40, and I'll make the wine go a little bit higher too, 20 and 20. And now, I think, yay, we can see our little stem. And I'm going to make this go 25, actually. Make the wine a little more full. There we go. Cool, and so now we know the stem is in the right position. And it actually looks like it's a tiny bit off-center, which means we can just do the exact same thing as before, where we do the transform, translate, and then the -50%, -50%. And actually, we only need to do it on one side, and so I'll do translate X, and then do -50%. And then that'll make sure that it's perfectly centered. Nice. And now we can make our animation a little bit more smooth. The animations default to not being a linear animation, but rather an ease in and ease out, and so it'll be fast at first and then slow down, fast at first and slow down, which I think kind of looks good in this particular case, but let me set everything back to 4 seconds like we had it before, because we want this to be a soothing glass of wine, not a crazy one. There we go. Now everything is in sync. And now we officially have a glass of wine. Thank you for the suggestion. That was a good one. And so I do hope you learned a little bit of something about CSS graphics. I know it's a lot to just kind of see how things are coded, and you're just like, okay, how do I remember all of that? You have the internet. There's lots of tutorials out there. If I were to do this one, for example, I'll just kind of talk through how I would do it. So one thing that I mentioned before, remember how the stem was sticking out of that bottom glass and we added that overflow hidden? That is the first thing that I would do is with this one. So I would make a circle. I would add a border radius. I would make this a rectangle here that's rotated, and then I would add that overflow hidden, so it would be cut off by the edges. This C could just be a circle, and then the border right could be transparent, and so that would make that a regular C. This M right here could be, it could also be a circle with the top and bottom borders transparent, and then you can add a rectangle here with just the left and the bottom borders set, the other one's transparent, and then it's rotated. And it's a lot of the similar techniques to make even the most complex graphics. So I do hope you learned something. And that being said, I'll go back to my presentation right here. If you would like to learn more about this, there are some really great resources and examples. This first one, .singlediv.com, is awesome. There's the person who runs it. She makes CSS art with just a single div. And so we had 5 in this particular one. She does the most complex art in just a single one, and it's really interesting. There's also a CSS art class on Skillshare by Christina Gordon, where she teaches you, I think, how to make a guitar with CSS, which is really interesting. And then, shameless plug, CodePen sends out a newsletter every week called the CodePen Spark, and it shows what interesting CSS art and blog posts have come out, so you can learn a lot more from that. And then also, like I mentioned before, if you want to check out @Cassidy is my Twitter, that's also my CodePen username, and you can see some of the art that I've made on CodePen and experiment with it, fork it, and try whatever you want. But that's it. Thank you very much.
That has been amazing. Thank you so much. It's been really great to see all this on-live experience. As always, if you have any questions, as she said, you could do it in Spanish or English.
Yeah, English or español.
Or Spanish slowly.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I really liked it. What is What do you find is the hardest part of CSS?
Oh, the hardest part of CSS. That is a good question. I think the hardest part is the little nuances that you don't know are built into CSS. So one thing that I mentioned at the beginning when I added the margin and padding 0 on the body, a lot of people don't know that. And a lot of times when you're making a layout and something is just a little bit off spacing-wise, it's because the browser naturally has a lot of those spacings in there. Like if you make an H1 tag, those always have margins at the bottom, where if you don't set them to 0, you will always have a spacing there that you have to deal with. And so I think figuring out what those natural browser inclinations are probably not necessarily the hardest, but the most annoying part and the hardest to deal with if you don't catch them early.
More questions? Otherwise, I do have.
Yeah.
Do you think that there will be a time in the future where all the browsers will agree with all these CSS incompatibilities?
Wouldn't that be great? That would be so nice.
You have always to build, well, if it's Edge, you have to do something for folks.
Right, and I think that's something that we're dealing with a lot at CodePen right now, and we recently dropped support for Internet Explorer 11, and we're going to see how long we support Edge, but even Microsoft is dropping Edge now, so we'll see. I think as we move to a more open source world, because of engines like Chromium and a lot of the engines behind Mozilla are being put to use and being actively worked on by everyone, I do think that someday we will have that unified standard, but there will always be someone who wants to mess with things.
So you're optimistic, that's
Yeah.
good. Any more questions or comments? Or you want to try
Oh,
to
yeah.
do something?
Please try it,
Well,
it's fun. Yeah.
Over there?
Yeah. Okay.
First of all, thank you for your talk. It's amazing. And when you have to make a CSS animation like that, that have moving, which one do you prefer? Use transform and translate, or position and top and bottom attributes?
That's a good question. And so it depends on how complex the animation is, because some browsers, they actually handle how smooth animations are differently. It's one of the nuances that I was mentioning before. I personally prefer to use absolute positioning where possible, because that is kind of the most supported of things. Like transform with translate and rotate and everything, it's supported, but it's a little janky. And animating by using absolute positioning and stuff it's been around longer, and so it's better supported. But that being said, they're being better supported every single day, and so both work. But I personally prefer to use the absolute positioning and stuff because your animations will be that much smoother.
Any more questions or comments? Well, then
You can always tweet me
We can
too.
do something. Allow me to interrupt here. Let's give them a little bit of time to think about another question by paying a visit to the command center.
Okay,
What do you
that's good.
think, Juan?
Would you mind if we try to see what's going on the networks, on Twitter? So
Yep.
yeah, go ahead. I don't know
Okay.
if we have a camera somewhere. We can
Okay.
put it here.
Vamos
you
a
can
ver
think
qué es-
about more.
We'll see.
¿Se me oye? Sí. Vamos a ver qué está pasando en el Command Center. Tenemos aquí a Mario. Mario, cuéntanos cómo está yendo.
¿Se me oye? Sí. Pues mira, sí, para un dato que te puedo dar es que el año pasado tuvimos unas 8.500 reproducciones en directo y ahora mismo ya llevamos, que vamos a media mañana del viernes, en total entre ayer y hoy llevamos unas 12.700. Así que un montón más que el año pasado.
Eso es bastante. Un aplauso. Gracias, Mario. Y ahora, Sara, ¿qué nos puedes contar? ¿Qué se está cociendo en redes?
Bueno, yo te voy a dar otro dato de asistencia, y es que ya hemos superado los 1.840 asistentes registrados en el evento, que son 200 más que el número del año pasado.
O sea, que estamos subiendo en el número de visitas online y en el número de asistentes físicos. Bueno, pues vamos a ver qué es lo que pasa por aquí, Lucía.
Bueno, aquí estamos con todos los fotógrafos que vamos de track en track corriendo para hacer fotos a los ponentes. Y luego también a nuestro pintor estamos también haciendo fotos de los dibujos que está haciendo de las charlas del track 1. Y bueno, mucho material.
Y existe
Pero
como una especie de concurso, ¿verdad?
Acuérdate de contarnos el concurso, exacto.
Sí, existe un concurso, estamos realizando un concurso ahora mismo para que suban a Twitter una foto del evento o a Instagram con el hashtag T3chFest 2019 y la foto que más nos guste ganará, la persona que haga la foto, ganará una cámara Insta y os animamos a que participéis, que todavía hay tiempo hasta que termine el evento.
Pues nada, si tenéis alguna foto súper interesante, colgadla en Instagram o en Twitter con el hashtag T3chFest 2019 y podrás entrar en el concurso para ganar una cámara instant, ¿verdad? Pues nada, Juan, te paso el testigo.
Muy bien, muchas gracias. Ya no sé si en inglés o español. ¿Alguna pregunta, algún comentario? ¿Queréis decir algo más? Ah, mira, ya tenemos una más. Bueno, me voy a tener que acercar. ¿Lo podéis pasar por allí? Muchas gracias.
Hi.
Hi.
Which browser and why do you recommend for doing this little test with CSS, please?
Chrome or Firefox, really. They both work pretty well. And sometimes when I'm debugging, and there will be sometimes where a div is just gone, and I don't know where it is. The dev tools on both of those are really good for visualizing, like if you inspect element, where the heck something has gone or how an animation is going. And Firefox in particular has some really great tools for tapping through an animation in the different keyframes. And yeah, both of those are very well supported and are really helpful for those.
Any last question? If not, I think that we have to thank her because you have come from very far from Seattle, so we're really thankful. And well,
Thank you
have
so much.
always
I'm
on
very tired.
Twitter. Thanks so much.